Good prompt. Excellent. Thanks so much, Gideon. All right. So, yes, I was saying that when it comes to the practice of ethics, and especially at the workplaces, for us in this part of the world, it looks like there are so many constraints that are actually making it difficult for us to navigate that particular field. When you take the Europeans and the Asians, gradually they are departing, even very much the Europeans and Americans, actually. They are gradually departing from the constraints of the social, all right, into what they call the modernization, which modernization means that there is so much consideration about a broader milieu of society as opposed to a very micro level or a very homogeneous level of society. So majority of the places you go is cosmopolitan, which means that there's a melting point where different cultures, different social practices have actually come together, and so it's affected the original kind of practices and have grown into a much more diverse practices, which makes it easier for them to navigate. But because we're still tied up to our local, our micro level, our homogeneous clan-based practices, it makes it difficult for us to actually navigate the ethics thing, especially when we are confronted with other kind of people and their practices. It makes it difficult. So we have to be a little bit mindful, if we want to actually navigate the ethics issues and avoid controversies. We have to be a little bit deliberate, because in the Europes and Americas, over time, it had become practice. I mean, something that they've been doing. So they don't even have to think twice, all right, when they work in a cultural environment. But for us, because we are still glued to our micro level, you have to be deliberate. Otherwise, you will find yourself in a controversy almost every day. It means that whatever you are saying, you have to be mindful of that. Must you change your word choices? Must you change your demeanor? Must you change the way you actually think about things? It is very, very crucial. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in a little bit of or in a very huge problem. Now, I was going to say that, let me give you a typical example. When you look at the issue of race, all right, and the issue of gender, etc., the complexity of ethics had even gone beyond these almost clear lines. Currently, we're talking about intersectionality. I don't know how many of you have actually heard that word. Intersectionality is looking at how people's demographics actually combine to even present more challenging situations for them, than the current, demographic description. So if you take a typical, case that we described, the Madame Kriba situation, for example, her gender being a woman, all right, in majority of the ethics discussions or in discussions of barriers, her gender itself could be a barrier, all right? And then she's, a disabled or a physically challenged person, all right? That adds to her problems. Are you with me? So she's now having two barriers that actually could actually be in the way of her doing things. Now, imagine that she found herself in Europe or America. Then perhaps her barriers could be three, because she could be one, a black person, two, a female, three, a what? A physically challenged person. Are you following the conversation?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So even where we have ethical issues for certain demographics, demographic description of people, we also have to look harder and see what else is actually adding to that person's issues that would make it even much more challenging. All right. So you could have two women, and then you would think that perhaps their barriers are the same. Their barriers are not the same, because one of the two women is from the south, maybe Greater Accra, Takoradi, all those big cities. But you have another woman who is perhaps from a very remote area in the north. These two people have two different challenges. The idea that they are women does not mean that they have the same challenge. They could have multiple challenges. So when you are faced with some of these instances, your ability to actually avoid any controversy, any ethical issue, is for you to actually look harder and to be very critical in terms of your observation, or what do you say, attention to detail, all right? In order that so for you to actually make a conventional decision, all right, or use the conventional approach for making ethical decisions or ethical judgment, yes, society may have certain, what do you call, marks or certain, framework for you to make that decision. But ask yourself whether that framework of society that you are using also actually fits, the constraints or the work environment, that you're in, i.e., the company that you find yourself. All right. So if you have, maybe you know that in Ghana, the society actually abhors lesbianism or gayism or something like that. All right. So you're at work, you're having a conversation, and you're telling somebody that, oh, as for you, your belief, because of your belief, you do not subscribe to, what do you call, gayism or lesbianism or any of these, pride, society. But don't forget that you are working in an environment, a corporate environment, that may have a completely different policy, all right, regarding that. And immediately you say that, the other party or the person who actually subscribes to that, or perhaps who actually is one, is going to raise an issue, or can actually raise an issue against you, to say that perhaps you have a very terrible, view about their gender, and that could actually be an issue. Meanwhile, you are very right within your space, because you're talking about the society and its prevailing, what you call, marks or norms for acceptability of views. You see, so when you're actually applying the conventional approach to making ethical decisions or business ethical decisions, you've got to also be mindful about other constraints that could actually impact on that, decision that you're taking, so that you don't find yourself in a very controversial position. I hope you understand the point I'm making. Any questions or contributions on that point before we move on to? Any contribution or questions? Yeah, Emmanuel.
Yes, sir. Please, can you give us a classic example, citing some of the constraints that the conventional approach business ethics?
Okay. Okay, I'll use my own example. One of our platforms, all right, that is Sandwich, one of the Sandwich platforms. A colleague actually posted an assignment, and I always say this is a class discussion, all right? It doesn't go up. A colleague posted an assignment, all right, on the platform, and the assignment is about religion. And according to the colleague, it's supposed to be religious marketing, all right? And that platform happens to be my course platform, a political marketing platform. So when the colleague posted that assignment, one of the other religious, other people of other faiths, I think the guy is a Muslim, all right?
Okay.
Actually commented that, oh sir, we've been told not to discuss religion on this platform, all right?
Okay.
Now,
okay.
When he said that, the colleague took offense and then was like, who told you not to discuss religion on this platform, etc. Now, I felt that was not right, and that was intimidating. So I came back and I came to the platform and I said, I don't know who told him, but certainly the university's handbook prescribes the university as a secular institution. And that is actually derived from the bigger constitution, which is the constitution of this country, say that this country is a secular. So you could not, in one way or the other, impose, certain religious values on other people, including, academic materials. Now, it became a very huge debate on the platform. Now, he is actually prescribing it from, and then he posed the question that religious marketing is part of the content that could be studied. So we are looking at the micro level, all right, of academic, of knowledge sharing. Then I said, fine, I agree. But the broader institution says that there's not supposed to be, an enforcement or coercion of religious values on other people if they do not actually appreciate that. So the debate was that, and then I asked him, okay, so are you also able to teach Islamic marketing? Because the content was very much Christian, doctrine marketing, so to speak. All right. So I asked that, are you also competent to teach Islamic marketing? If the answer is yes, then you could be permitted. All right. But if the answer is no, then you cannot, actually use this as, a teaching material, because none of us is actually competent to teach Islamic marketing. Right. Are you following the debate?
Yes.
Okay. So eventually the colleague got angry, deleted themselves from the platform. I said, so be it. Eventually they came back. But I had to stand for the student because I know what the Constitution says, and I know what is ethically right and not ethically wrong. Sometimes we make a mistake to think that we're an authority, so we could actually prescribe things for people to do. But that is not the right thing to do. People must be able to stand up and question authorities' decisions. I hope I'm clear on that, Emmanuel.
Yes. So, in an instance where maybe you are in an office, and then it has been enshrined in your ethics, the code of ethics, that if you are a subordinate, you are not supposed to sit on your superior's chair. And then somebody, or maybe your boss directs that nobody should sit on my chair apart from my good self. And then, yes, so we are all supposed to abide by it. And then a director, somebody who is above your boss, comes into the office and then sits on your boss's chair. So do you have to go the extra mile, be harder, and then tell the person that it is ethically
wrong? That wouldn't be an ethical question or ethical, constraint. That would certainly be a typical rules and regulations of a company. Now, I suppose what probably would qualify as an ethics issue is where perhaps your immediate boss has instructed perhaps everybody to pray, for example, all right? And then perhaps the superior had actually come to instruct that you disobey that rule, okay? So perhaps these instances could actually be, classified as ethical issue. But then, of course, what is the position of the organization is the bigger society that you are making references to, whereas your immediate boss's order is actually the micro level. I hope you understand what I mean.
All right.
So you are taking your ethical references from the bigger, society, which is from your corporate level or from your boss's instructions, as opposed to what do you call the immediate boss's instruction. Now, I give you another typical example. One of my colleagues, in fact, he's almost like my brother. We were very good friends for almost 18 years in England, all right? Now, we used to work at a place, those of you who are familiar with, Britain, you would know about this company. They call it Dixon's. These days, they've changed the name. They call it Know-How now. Now, when we used to work there, sorry? Yeah. When we used to work there, all of us have a comfort break of 5 minutes. Yeah. So throughout your shift, for the next, 7 hours or whatever hours, our comfort break was 5 minutes. And then if you do 12-hour shift, I think no, was 15 minutes, sorry. And if you do 12-hour shift, a little bit of is added to you. Now, he always went for comfort break, and his comfort break is always going to like 20, 25, and he's always having issues with his line manager. All right. Now, the line manager told him that he cannot have comfort breaks more than everybody else. Then he said, well, he's a Muslim, the practices that he has to actually do when he go for comfort break is different from everybody else. The lady didn't understand it. He complained, and then the HR actually summoned the line manager and warned the line manager. So eventually they instituted it as a procedure that he could have a comfort break beyond 15 minutes, and they increased it by 10 minutes for him. It became, what do you call a law? So although the line manager was actually following the company's instruction that everybody's comfort break is supposed to be 15 because of quality control, etc., it was overruled, and then the wider societal issue regarding his religion was actually implemented.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other question? Okay. So when a company fails to institute, what do you call ethical regulations, at the workplace, what you get is ethical relativism, where people would actually pick and choose the source of their ethical decision making, right? And they wouldn't be wrong, because as we said, we are all raised from different backgrounds. Our understanding of social values are completely different, dependent on where we were born, dependent on how we grew up, dependent on the people that we socialize, our socialization, dependent on so many other things. And then, of course, even sometimes dependent on, whether we want to get out of the hook, i.e., the situation that has happened could put us in danger, or could actually, get us, out of the hook. So if you do not, as a business, as an organization, institute, ethical framework, with which the workers can actually, make effective decisions, what you get is a ethical relativism, where everybody is actually referring to their source of ethical judgment. And that would not augur well for the business, because you're going to have a lot of controversies, as we speak. So you've got to make sure that you can avoid ethical relativism as a business by actually having an ethics framework, with which everybody could actually make, competent decisions without any, kind of lingerings, or without any, doubt in their minds. All right. I hope it's clear on that. All right. All right. Hilda, do you want to ask a question? Okay.
No.
Yeah. You want to say something?
Doc, I seem to be lost.
Okay.
I just wanted you to anchor me again.
Okay.
In the first two slides.
Okay. So we are continuing the discussion we had last time we had a class. And the last slide that we got to before the class finished was about how do you apply, or what do you do when you are faced with ethical questions at workplaces, or you are faced with ethical decisions. All right. That is, you're faced with situations where you have to make, ethical decisions. And remember, ethical decisions are not your usual SOPs, or standard operation or operating procedures. These are completely different kind of decisions that you could be faced with. All right. And we said that one of the frameworks that you can use to make ethical decisions is what we call the conventional approach. All right. Where conventional approach means you're looking at the situation at hand, and you're looking at, what social framework or what societal frameworks or norms could be or is acceptable that you can use to actually make that decision. Are you with me? Yeah. Yeah.
I get you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And then the second slide is about, ethical relativism, and we're saying that if an organization does not institute, a framework for making ethical decisions, and then leaves the ethical decisions to conventional approach, where people would actually look at their society's prevailing norms to make, what you call decision making, you could actually have a problem of ethical relativism where people would actually make references to their upbringing or their, ethical code to make those decisions, where you could actually then have, different results and different, levels of controversy. So it is always good for a company or an organization to actually create or to develop ethical guidelines for its staff so that you can avoid ethical relativism. Is that clear on that one too? Okay. So 4 important ethical questions that we make, when you are faced with, situations where you have to make ethical decisions. One of them is, what is it? I mean, the situation that is happening, so what is the situation that you have to actually make an ethical judgment of, or what ought to be? And as we, discussed the other time about teleological, and then, deontological, decisions, these are the frameworks that actually govern that. You're looking at what is or what ought to be, and then you're looking at how do we get, from what is to what ought to be. And these what is and what ought to be are 2 different frames. One is more descriptive, the other one is what? The normative. And the descriptive is actually about what is happening now and what judgment you can actually make. The normative is about the norms that actually govern the ethical, situations within the organization. And then what is our motivation in all this? So as you're making the decisions, there are obviously rationale, or there are motivations behind the decision that you're making. So you've got to also ask yourself, what would be the motivation for making such, what do you call, ethical decisions, and whether that motivation actually helps you, the individual or the organization. You should be able to make decisions from that. And remember, what we are learning now is helping you to build frameworks for making ethical decisions. Let me repeat. It's helping you to build frameworks for making ethical decisions so that you don't find yourself in a very controversial, situation. I hope I'm clear on that. All right. Now, the levels for, or 5 levels for questions, which means 5 levels of ethical considerations. As we said, the level 1, which is the level of the individual. So at the level of individual, there is certain, what do you call, values, or there are certain values that actually govern our ethical conduct. And those values include, our upbringing, our, what do you call, religious, and this call should be made a call. Okay. Abubakar. Now, yes, thanks. All right. So at the individual level, you realize that your association with, religious group, or your socialization, family socialization, religious socialization, obviously educational level, etc., actually define your individual level of ethical considerations. All right. Then, of course, the organizational level, where we actually make ethical decisions, is one, the organization's own mission statement, the organization's own ownership. Ownership of organization also inform the way the organization behave. So the ownership of the organization, its mission and vision, and its, what do you call, the makeup of the parties involved in the organization would also actually be a source for ethical, considerations or ethical formation. Then, of course, the level of industry or profession, societal level, global or international level, all these are levels that we actually take, ethical decisions from. So for you to actually make an ethical judgment, you want to know whether the judgment is coming from a personal level or is coming from an organizational level. But you should be mindful that majority of the times there could be conflict because the organization may have its own ethical, consideration, but it may not be in tune with, the industry level ethical consideration. When that tension happens and there is an issue, the regulator or the players within the industry could actually find, fault with the business to even the extent that consumers or customers can actually revolt against the business because your ethical conduct is not well in tune with what the industry practices, or is not well in tune with the industry practices. Sometimes it could be in tune with the industry practices, but society had moved on. And we just had, some of the, demonstrations after the George Floyd incident, where some, Black communities are accusing, some companies for taking advantage of the Black Lives Matter, to make profit. Maybe they were actually doing that for genuine reasons, all right? But here is the case, there's so much societal awareness that no matter what you do, people are actually reading into it and asking themselves, what is the motivation behind this action? And so you realize that what the company actually took as a very good, decision now is in conflict with the societal level of, ethical conduct. And so you have to actually, review it and see what you can actually do, with that. Sometimes the societal level would also be in conflict or in tension with global, level. So when an organization sets out ethical conduct, you want to review those conduct alongside these levels, on the individual level, on the organization level, on the industry level, on societal level, and then on global level. Why must you do this? Anyone to answer that? Why must you do that? Especially why must you check organizations ethical framework with individual level ethical frames? Why must you do that? Yeah? It looks like today the class is quiet. Okay, Gideon.
Doc,
Yeah.
so we don't have conflicting ethics. So that, for instance, if per my individual upbringing, like you stated, like my upbringing is of a particular line.
Mm-hmm.
Example, I'm against my upbringing is against the use of or the eating of pork or the eating of chicken.
Yeah.
And then the organization is into the sale or production of chicken, where I would have to probably partake in stuff like that. If these are conflicting ethics, it wouldn't make there wouldn't be a more like an agreement between those two institutions, so like myself and then the institution. So it would lead to conflicting. If there are different ethics, it will lead to conflicting situations.
Excellent. Excellent. And that means that when that gap is identified, then of course the organization could actually conduct training or a certain review to align that with the staff, or the staff could be asked to, could be asked what measures they can take. So you find that some companies can transfer certain staff to certain places that may not have a conflicting ethical issues, with their conduct. So organizations must actually take that ethics review in line with their staff in order that they could actually do this. If there has to be a training, then they can have a training, because there are some people who hold a very strong gender stereotypes, all right? Like people who actually say that, oh, when you marry, your wife is supposed to cook for you. Okay? Now, is it supposed to cook for you as a must, or is it, a kind of a shared, position? Some companies have a very strong ethical conduct or ethical, frameworks on gender relationship. And when they realize that you have a very, stereotypical view of certain genders, then they will start giving you training, or they may start, kind of instituting certain measures in order that you could actually reduce that tension, between. So yeah, that's a good point, Gideon. Abracadabra.
So I think Gideon mentioned it, so okay. I'm fine.
Okay, good. Nigel.
Yeah.
Nigel.
I wanted to find out that what extent does this ethics that the society, the organization has to incorporate in its organizational ethical framework, to what extent does it go to? Like, is it to all levels of the organization? I mean, does it cover the entire?
Yeah, the scope.
Because there was this situation in my company. So when I think Gideon gave his comments, it just brought my attention to it. Where we're about to have lunch. It was just a normal day. And we have contracted this catering service that come to provide us with food. So on the menu for that day, I think it was pork stew and something, rice or something.
Yeah.
And one of our drivers, dispatch riders, was a Muslim. Had gone about the whole day, was so tired, came back around 3, coming to have lunch. He just went to the kitchen, and on the menu today was pork stew and rice.
Wow.
And he was so disturbed because I think the other substitute was not anything he wanted to eat, so he wanted to go for the rice. But it was pork stew. And I mean, I don't think the organization has thought of this, of including it in its framework, something as lunch, considering. So I wanted to find to what extent, what level does this so ethical
this is a powerful case study. Exactly the point you're making. Now, companies usually, when they make decisions, it's at the very apex level, top level, without any realization or attention to the entire structures. And as you said, I mean, when you make some of these frameworks, it's supposed to be holistic. It's supposed to be universal, right from the top to the bottom. Something as lunch could actually cause, if it was in Europe, all right, or even if it was in America, it could cause whoever is responsible for that particular section, whether it's the HR or the catering manager, it could cost their jobs, all right? Especially if this guy decides to complain, all right? And something that is fundamental as religious beliefs, in some of these, multinational organizations, they take it very, very seriously. They take it very, very, very seriously. So if it were elsewhere, people could actually face disciplinary. So it's supposed to be throughout the structure, right from the top to the bottom.
Okay.
All right. Great point. I think that's a very good case study. All right. Now, who else? Okay. So as I said, you want to do this ethical review along these 5 levels in order that you can identify the gaps in them and then try to solve them. For example, at the individual level, just from what Nigel is saying, if they had actually cross-checked with almost everybody, what kind of food types, do you like, or are you permitted? And they had actually seen that there were Muslims, or even, per the organizational information data, you could see that people's religious backgrounds are Muslims, this and that. You could use that to actually develop a list or a checklist of food types and then circulate it within the institution for people to actually indicate. And not only pork, but Muslims will talk about halal, all right? Even the nitty-gritty of food description. And I remember, my days when I was working with Sheffield BME. Now, when we have a community, we used to have what we call a town hall meetings, all right, or town hall discussions. When we have a town hall discussions, now the BME means Black and minority ethnic groups, and that's diverse, like Pakistanis, Ghanaians, Nigerians, Ethiopians. So you can imagine the difficulty in thinking about what food must you bring to to the program for lunch or for after the event. It is a Herculean task. So we always circulate. We do service. We circulate to our member groups because we're an umbrella organization. So we circulate to our member groups for them to identify food types. And whenever we go for an event and we set up the food table, the labeling is so precise. So this is basmati rice, and then a little bit of narrative about it is there. This is so and so, whatever, a little bit of narrative. Look, if you fail to give these descriptions of food types, you would actually get a query from council and you could actually be in trouble. But you see, these attention to detail, as we're talking about, these auditing of, ethical, issues are not something that we even think about in our organizations. But as we strive and yearn to become global players, and especially for you guys, who most of you are actually working in global firms or multinational firms, or in some days, sometime, you may find yourself in a multinational positions. You have to start thinking about these things. We don't have to take it for granted. We have to start having that level of thinking. Today we're discussing it at the place that I went, and somebody was saying, "Hey, Kobe, you there? Every day you're saying something. What we haven't gotten there yet." I said, "Look, when do we expect to get there? We haven't gotten there yet. We keep saying we haven't gotten. There must be deliberate attempts to get there. Countries didn't just get to places by linear development. There must be deliberation." But anyway, yeah, abracadabra.
So just to add to what you are saying and to affirm that what you are saying is true, in my previous work line, my employers actually, so we have a canteen committee where it involves top level managers, middle, and then the staff. Okay, where they have discussions as to what goes into it and everything that has to be put in place. So the deliberations go in there to put into all those things in terms of religion and what people actually want after they have conducted the survey. Another thing they also did was on a daily basis, they will share the menu. So in each department, there's a screen where we have all our announcements going on. So the menu is being shared on. So it kind of like prompts you even before the lunch time to know what exactly is at the canteen, so that it comes more like prepares your mind towards that. So what you are saying is right. And I believe for us as students as well, we should have it at the back of our minds to be able to adapt to such situations. Yeah.
Excellent. That's a good point, a good case study. And you see, when an organization behaves like that, the staff feels that this is an organization that actually understands me. This is an organization that is actually there for me. And you realize that people's loyalty level to such organizations are very, very high, to the extent that even when they have to take better positions elsewhere or better offer elsewhere, they feel sad leaving because they are an institution that actually responds to their needs. All right, Gideon, is your hand up?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, good. So these are some of the points that when you're doing the ethics audit, you want to look at what are people's personal ethics, all right? What are organizations' ethics? What are the ethics practice in the industry? What are the society's ethics? And what global ethics are there in the practice today? So you are taking an audit of the ethical instances, yes? Emmanuel.
Sorry to take us back,
Yeah,
but I want to find out in the scenario or in the case that one of my colleagues gave about a Muslim guy who went into the kitchen and then he when he got the what was available for him to eat was so in the situation where all the structures are there and he is aware that today this is what we are serving, and he still goes in there to open maybe to eat, and then it is against his individual code of ethics. What happens?
Yeah, I think okay, so I think the Nigeria's narrative was that the guy, or case study was the guy wasn't aware, but you are saying that in instances where the person is aware.
This is aware, and then you still go in, and then you get furious about
No,
it.
certainly they will not be furious, but once the person is aware, it means that the organization is also providing varieties, isn't it? Because if it's a structure, then it means the company, much as the individual, is aware of what is available. So certainly the organization will provide what must be available for this gentleman who actually came in to find that it's only pork. But certainly the Nigel's case study, demonstrated that the company hadn't factored in ethical considerations for individual level. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why that gap happened.
Right.
Yeah. So when you're doing the ethical conduct, you are looking at what are people's personal ethical issues, what are organizations' ethics, what are the ethics practices in the industry, what are the society's ethics, and what are global. Majority of times, these ethical issues sit with the HR department. Majority of times, they are supposed to have the ethical audits from time to time to review, whether it's in line with these levels of ethical consideration that we're talking about, from the individual level to the global level, to make sure that the company is ethically compliant, right from the individual to the global considerations, all right? And then, of course, sometimes the organizations want to be very much, visionary, or very much, futuristic. And you could actually have an ethical conduct that are actually futuristic. Of course, in today's society, it may not be relevant, but the organization is actually looking at what ought to be in future. And I keep saying that in this country, we keep harboring certain what we consider as very difficult topics. We will not have those discussions today. We would want to wait until the time is here before we start discussing that. And as I put forward to you the other time about the language issue, whether we should start having that conversation now or we should wait in future. There are so many other issues that are underlying that the country is not talking about. And I'll give you a typical example. Currently, as we speak, whenever you mention something about, what do you call, lesbian, LGBT in total, all right? People would not even let you speak immediately. It's one of the hottest discussions you can ever raise in any part of this country. All right, one of the hottest. Now, because we are very much culturally linked, very much religiously linked. But don't forget, society is dynamic. All right, in the next 20 years, 30 years, we're gonna have an occurrence of some of these things. How does the country deal with that? Perhaps in some countries, they will start having the conversation now in order that everybody is actually prepared. But in this country, immediately you say, let's have conversation. People say, oh, you are giving it a publicity. But this is what development brings about, or developed countries do. They start having conversation. As we speak now, our homes, we still find it difficult to discuss sex issues with our children, with our young ones, etc. A lot of families actually find it very tough. And it's not a small conversation. It's very, very tough conversation. But the point is that, do we start having conversations now in order that they can guide us in future? So there are so many, ought to be conversations that we're not having, including LGBT, I remember that I was on a board of tourism, Hotcat. And one time I posed the question that, I think it wasn't on a board, but it was a discussion that we have. And I was asking people that, look, if we want to actually get tourism to the levels of Gambia and all those people that we look at, and then we say we want to make sure that our tourism is huge. One part of the huge tourism areas, or when you go to, what do you call the Jamaicas and all the Seychelles areas, all right? One of the big parts of tourism is nightlife. I mean, sex tourism, for example. Now, what's the country's position on sex tourism? Immediately you mention that people go, hey, Charlie, this topic, they're making no bring. You know, and sometimes you realize that when are we going to discuss certain tough issues? We don't. Abracadabra.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah.
Just to add to what you're saying, especially on the gay and lesbian issues, even in the EPL, the premiership that they play, okay, during the months, some of the months where they are celebrating it, all the captains that wear the armband put on the rainbow armband, which signifies the lesbians and the gay.
Yeah,
exactly. And there are even companies, some multinationals in Ghana and world, that have actually changed their logos currently, signifying the acceptance of gay and lesbianism. So it's actually going on, except that we need to accept it or have that perception that in the next few years that to come, these topics will become more like an easy topic to discuss. So we need to move from the idea that we have our own individual ethics and all that if you want to really be a big player in the environment.
Yeah, I think even the question is that not even about accepting it, but it's about, can we discuss it and then look at what are its challenges? What are the other, narratives that we can bring on board? Are people actually doing it? Why are they doing it? And what are the implications, for doing it? In order that we could actually have a holistic view, but we'll not even talk about it. That's the problem. Yakubu.
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah.
The class will have to forgive me with my words.
That's all right. That's all right. It's
yes.
Class,
I had a
speech.
Yes, about 10 years ago. A lady from Texas.
Yeah.
Who was into medical training.
Yeah.
Wanted to come and do voluntary medical stuff at La Polyclinic. And she was introduced to me to assist her settle down. And to my surprise, she showed me her passport. She has been to Jamaica, the Tobagos, and other places. The next question she was asking me was to find her an African man who can satisfy her sexually.
Yeah.
And I asked why. She said, when you go black. She said, when you go black,
an African
don't
man.
go back.
Yeah.
Yakubu, are you sure you are not the one?
Is she still around?
Please let me laugh.
Is she still around?
Yakubu didn't. No, let me laugh, please.
Allow Yakubu, please.
And I was a serious vegan at those days.
Yeah.
Practicing veganism.
Yeah.
So I had to find some Rastafarian guys for this girl. Because he said, it's not about money.
Yeah.
But if she can speak good English, she'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so that was what we settled. And I thought to myself, I will never go into this thing in my life.
Yeah.
Yakubu, I have my doubt. I think it was you.
So she goes to the Caribbean, purposely to get sexual satisfaction, and then come back.
Oh yeah.
But and the father is a big lawyer in the Republican Party in Texas.
And next person
the money is there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and so what you are saying is it's been there.
You are right. You see, when you take Gambia, for example, the reason why Gambia's tourism is on the rise, and we always are looking at Gambia numbers. Gambia is open secret that Gambia has sex tourism as a big time part of their tourism. All right. And they call their boys bombers, the Europeans, they have the name they call the guys. Most of the CEOs, and maybe I'll follow Yakubu's, tradition to say that, perhaps, excuse me to say, most of the CEOs, women in Europe, all right, majority of them are so busy, looking for their businesses, etc. So they eventually, when they take their leaves, they are looking for places where they can have satisfaction, all right? And they come to these places. They go to the Caribbean, they come to what do you call Gambia and all that to have satisfaction. They go back. The same as the men, they do that. And these are big time rich people, all right, who in tourism is satisfaction sexually, and that's what they do. So the issue is that what is the position of the country? So once you have that conversation, you can say that no, this is not going to be part. Then of course that can actually be part of your objective, so or your target. So if you know that sex tourism is not going to be part of your product line, then the issue is that you should not be ambitious as having a market like Gambia, when you know very well that a big chunk of Gambia's market is because of the sex tourism, sector. So you could have ambitious, target, ambitious objectives, but in reality, you are not prepared to actually do what would actually add to that kind of ambitious, target. So that's the kind of a thing that we're in. We are always not practical in our thinking. We want this level of development, we want this level of money, but we're not prepared to this level of this. Meanwhile, we're not also prepared to reduce our level of ambition, So these are some of the issues. Yeah.
Can I come again?
Okay, Yakubu, before Romeo.
Okay. Listen, when I was managing the vegetarian restaurant around bus stop where Harris Akosi office.
Yeah.
Behind a salon down, there's this hostel that young girls from Scandinavia comes in to do voluntary services in the country. Nothing. And they were able to tell me that there's a nightclub at Photo Club down, Osu down.
Yeah.
Around Photo Club. That they have matchmaking days every Wednesdays and Thursdays evening. These young white girls will go there. You don't need to have money. Just have a place you can take care to. And they make sure that you have some money to just buy some drinks for them to satisfy. Then after they drink, you don't propose, you just take away.
Wow.
And it was crazy.
Okay. All right, thank you. Romeo, next.
So look, I think you are right, because as a country we should be having conversation on some of these critical issues. But for me, I think we are just being hypocritical as a nation, because things are going on, and let's say, for instance, this issue that Yakubu has raised. See the way the classes, hey, Yakubu, but these are things that are part of us. We are humans. We are humans. Yeah. And you see, we do these things.
Yeah, we've lost you, Romeo. Romeo, we've lost you. Okay, Daniel, come in there. When Romeo comes in, we can.
And when we come public, Daniel, so this conversation, we need to have years to come. Some of these things, yeah. Hello?
Yeah, we are listening.
So, Doc, so I think, I mean, like you said, we need to advocate for some of these things so that we start the conversation as early as practical, because we can't do without it. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Daniel.
Right, Doc, I'd like to ask a question. Do you think perhaps that maybe the level of literacy and awareness, exposure, what have you, in Ghana, for example, could be part of the reason why we are so unwilling to have these kind of discussions? Because, well, the Bible says, actually in Proverbs chapter 24, verse 7, knowledge is too high for a fool. That's a part of it. Means that some people just institution for these kind of discussions. That may be the reason why some states are not interested in opening up the forum for the discussion, because some people are just not informed enough to make a proper submission or have a proper opinion or an informed opinion on the issues. And then when it becomes a free for all, we may actually have more harm than good. So my question again, do you think that the constitution of the Ghanaian people is part of the reason why we can have this discussion? And if there's anything we can do, maybe in terms of education.
Yeah. Okay, great question, Daniel. From my own personal perspectives, I have one simple, thing that I always say. Times immemorial, we always make references to illiteracy. Now, since the time of F-cube, the introduction of GSS, SS, etc., and of course now free SHS. If you look at our system now, I think literacy is no longer the 60%, 70% we used to say. In fact, I'm sure that we are even hitting 90% literacy level. All right. Now, if you go to Britain, for example, and I cite that example because I've lived there for quite a bit now. Now, when you go to Britain, literacy is actually defined as, any level of literacy that can actually help you function. So they call it functional literacy. Now, you realize that people who have actually finished, A level, not even A level, O level, all right? Immediately they finish O level or even less, but they could read and write. They actually considered as literate, functional literate. So if we use that definition, then of course, someone who actually finishes JSS in this country is supposed to be a functionally literate person, all right? And that means our literacy level could hit about 90%, all right, or more. Now, in that instance, it means that literacy may not be the reason why we're not having this conversation. For me, I think that one of the reasons why we're not having such conversations is because increasingly we are somehow, I don't know how to put it, defining things wrongly. We actually link, in this country, we link, entertainment to religion. And so if you're on campus and you go to club, you are the sinner. If you actually decide to maybe go to the beach, you are the sinner. If you go to the church, you don't go to beach. Or if you are part of the SU, you don't go to beach. Some of these misconceptions is actually what is actually, is what is, reducing our ability or is hindering our ability to have some of these conversations, all right? And so it is much more of how do we reorientate people to understand that some of these conversations doesn't mean someone is a bad person. Do you get it? And that's my view. I think that literacy, well, I think we are now becoming a highly literate society now. But what is the conflating issue is the hook and a misinterpretation or misdefinition of things as a result of the religious, beliefs that we have. And that is what is actually conflating. And currently, the religious leaders are not making things better because almost every day, people are being, deceived because of material things by some people who are not genuinely religious, but continuously misguiding people and then letting people, not actually understand better how the society should be. So for me, that's my view on that. Maybe it could have something to do with education, but I think the literacy level is high.
Right. Yeah, Doc.
Yeah, Yakubu.
I just like what the examples you cited, 100% perfect. We are made to understand that you don't discuss sex in the open. Sex is supposed to be with a matured man and a matured woman. Where I'm coming from, I had an uncle who could go to the bathroom, open compound bathroom with his girlfriend to bath.
Yeah.
And society was frowning on them.
Yeah. Yakubu, your point is exciting, Linda. Anyway, yeah, come in.
Hey, Linda.
And my uncle has no issue.
Okay.
Okay, Doc.
Yeah.
Maybe some of us are familiar with Robert Greene. But I used to like that writer for one thing. He could say things that cut to the moral about how society functions. What ought to be will never be, because if what ought to be is allowed to be, then there will be a seismic shift in terms of who has power and who is relevant in society. If we look at our society, it's purely built on our culture, the way we do things. And the way we do things has been going for a long time such that people now have certain positions of power, be it economic power, political power, cultural power, whatever it is, they have power.
Mm-hmm.
If we decide to talk about equity and fairness, all those centers of power will disintegrate.
Yeah.
And therefore, they won't allow those discussions to happen. I can give a clear example. When Obama was in Ghana, he said that the institutions in Ghana should work.
Yeah.
The moment the institutions in Ghana start working, our MPs will lose relevance. Our ministers will lose relevance. The police guys who are becoming executioners, jury, and judges will lose relevance. And one of the greatest needs of a human being is to be relevant. So what ought to be will just continue remaining in our books.
But let me ask you, yeah, does that suggest that those entities do not change as well? Because you're actually holding them constant, whereas the other ones are actually changing. But society doesn't actually function that way. So, in as much as they are changing, of course, the other things are changing. And, for example, Francis Fukuyama actually talked about the transientity of society, where everything is transient, all right? And so where the wedding gown is becoming transient, people are feeling now not buying a wedding gown because immediately after the wedding, the gown would have to be hung there for like maybe until when they are dead before they actually robed into the wedding gown. Certainly, it does not actually make the rest of the systems irrelevant because they're also upgrading and they're also moving up. So I don't think that if the institutions start working, this police will become relevant. They probably will have to realign their functions to the modernity as we are prescribing them, isn't it?
So who is going to lose that power? The person who is going to lose his relevance because he's going to be the same level as all others is going to fight tooth and nail to it. So we have become a classic case of if we are all getting mad, the person who stands to be right becomes the mad person actually because society keeps on changing. But it would always gravitate to this centers of power. If you go back to our previous, I always ask this question about culture, centers of power, centers of power. They do metamorphosize though, it shifts. But so far as there is a center of power, it has to remain relevant. Otherwise, it loses its source of power. So isn't that the reason why things that ought to be will continue remaining in books?
No, I agree with you to some extent, but I believe that we as a society have to be futuristic and then understand that the dynamism of the society suggests that things cannot be as they are now. Things ought to be. And if things ought to be, it has to be in a very deliberative way, i.e., we having or making the effort to change them. Currently, I think that we have set our society on autopilot. And for me, that's why we're not having, as you said, a seismic change because everybody that comes only takes taxes and pay back as salaries. All right. People are not making genuine effort to actually change the dynamics of the society. And that's why we're in. But if people were actually taking a very deliberative effort, we could see that, yeah, things ought to be, would definitely be. But perhaps it looks like we are happy in where we are. So, that deliberative efforts are not actually being taken. But I can understand the point you're coming from, certainly, because there is no effort to ensure that things ought to be would be. All right. Anyway, Yakubu, is your hand still up? All right.
It's a mistake.
Yeah?
It's a mistake.
It's a mistake. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on. We're supposed to finish at 6, all right? Or let's say 5:45 then. All right. So let's look at the 3 models of management ethics, and I'm sure a lot of you would find yourself in this space, those of you in management positions, etc., or aspiring to be. It says that an approach that is immoral management. Those who find themselves, and I'm sure I hope a lot of you are not in this category. All right. Those management who find themselves in the immoral category is an approach devoid of ethical principles and an active opposition to what is ethical. They operate in a strategy of immoral management is focused on, or the operating strategy of immoral management is focused on exploiting opportunities for corporate or personal gains. And this is typically, what we talked about Enron, and even in our own, country, there are certain institutions that have been found in this category. And whether they are truth or they are propaganda, what we heard were that some companies were actually behaving in a very immoral, way. All right. So for the first, ethical conduct, some management are considered immoral because they will go every length to achieve the corporate goals or the corporate gains, personal gains, without any consideration for ethical, conduct. All right. And obviously we've had a number of organizations, and as I said, whether propaganda or truth, we had them, a lot of things we had. All right. The moral manager or the moral management conforms to high standards of ethical behavior or professional standard of conduct. And then
I belong there.
You belong
I belong there.
Cool. All right. And then amoral, these are intentional, does not consider ethical factors, but unintentional amoral is casual or careless about ethical factors. So certainly the 2 is the ideal. The number 2 is the ideal, but the number 1 and number 3, which ones do you want to? Do you think? I don't know what I should say. Do you think is good or bad? But which one do you think is very, very worst, and which one do you think is somehow okay? Would you be immoral manager or amoral manager?
Immoral.
Immoral. So at least immoral is better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Explain to us why immoral is better. Bridget.
Because at least, okay, from what I understand so far,
Yeah.
at least the immoral, you have taken a stance.
Yeah.
Like you're on one side.
Yeah.
But for the amoral, it's like sometimes you are here, sometimes you are there.
Yeah. And indeed, as you said, the amoral manager, it's difficult to tell what their intentions are. I mean, the first one, it is clear. The guy is for money, all right? And it's, so you can actually understand their modus operandi and be able to engage, in a level that, it deserves. But for the third one, the amoral guy, you can't really tell what their intentions are and what their conduct are, all right? So they are more of a chameleon type of people, and you don't want to be in such a company. So obviously the best one is the moral manager, and then the worst ones, I think, is amoral, and of course the immoral is them. So any questions on these ones?
Immoral.
Yeah. So characteristics of immoral manager: intentionally, do wrong, self-centered and self-absorbed, care only about self-organizational profits, actively opposed to what is right, fair, or just, exhibit no concern for stakeholders, and ethics course probably would not help them because they themselves, they've made their minds, right? And then characteristics of moral managers, obviously, and then habits of moral leaders. Anyway, guys, we can actually end here. Any questions or contributions? Any questions or contributions? You have a class at 6, right? Linda?
That's for those in group A.
Yes, Doc. There's a class at 6 for group A, actually.
Okay. So I don't have to hold you guys to myself so that you can prepare.
Thank you.
That's all right. Anyway, so thanks, guys. When is our next class, Linda?
I think it's on Saturday.
Saturday, okay. I will start collecting some case studies and then share with you guys so that you can work in groups for us to start discussing some of the issues. All right.
Okay. No.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, Yakubu.
Where you can connect me to the political strategy marketing.
Okay. The group. All right. Yeah, I would add you to the group. In fact, we just finished one documentary on Sarah Palin, but I'll add you to the group. Yeah, we're looking at
Alaska woman.
Yeah, the Alaska woman. Yeah, we're looking at the strategy for selecting vice candidates and.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, I'll add you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Doc.
Yeah.
Doc.
Yeah, remember.
Doc.
Yeah,
so I want to ask you a quick one.
Yeah.
You know, the NDC, they are delaying in the choice of their vice presidential candidates.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's going to, affect them because, because Baumia made a reference to John the last time he made that speech, that this thing is trying to make him incompetent.
I get your point.
Like
I get your point. Let me come in. If you look at the trend, all right, and today I was on FM, telling them. If you look at the trend, majority of the times, the electoral cycles, we have selected. Candidates have selected their vice, or their vice candidate somewhere in August. Before selected in August in 2000. Nanado selected in August 14th in 2008. Now, if you look at the plane, when you look at in Europe and America, for example, Obama selected in August as well, and they even have their elections in November. All right. So when you look at it, depending on the strategy that a political party wants to pursue, and I was telling them about two strategies that a political party may pursue in terms of their campaign. What we call the front loading and back loading. You can front load your strategy or back load your strategy. Front loading means that you could actually push your manifesto, candidate selection, everything else very early in the campaign period, all right? Or you can actually do that very late in the campaign period. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes you want to, the selection of the candidate may come with its pump or with its, momentum. And you want to drive the momentum way down into the campaign. When you select early, that momentum will dwindle and you would not be able to drive that excitement into the campaign. But when you select early, you have the opportunity to work on the candidate just in case you throw that at the candidate. Now, if you select late and the candidate is throwing that at, you may not have the opportunity to actually, so they all have their, so you won't call it as delaying, but one is that what is the strategy that they want to actually execute? That's the key point.
Doc, I have a propaganda answer.
Okay.
Baumia has raised the standard to a point that they can't fit anybody, they can't get anybody to fit.
Okay.
They are looking around.
Okay. I couldn't answer that one because that is okay, guys. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you very much.
Yakubu.
Yeah.
Yakubu, how many times have I mentioned you?
2 times. Where Daniel Kumi?
I'm calling you.